as I strive ever eagerly to live in thy light. Om Shanti Shanti. Amen. We'll now have our reading.
This week's reading is from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. How high should we aspire? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The passage this week is from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. I say unto you that except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. The easiest explanation for these words is that they were spoken in criticism of the scribes and Pharisees, particularly since Jesus was often verbally attacked by them and stood up to them fearlessly. However, it wouldn't have been much of a challenge to the disciples who aspired to spiritual perfection to tell them, don't be like those who lack any such aspiration. Jesus, in fact, says only a few verses later, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. What Jesus was referring to here then was the self-righteousness of the priests. Don't seek perfection, he was saying to his disciples, in the image you project toward others. Don't be satisfied with a goodness born merely of ego definitions. The highest virtue is to transcend the very thought of personal virtue in the realization of God alone as the doer. Before this realization, even the thought, I am kind or I am truthful, is self-limiting. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita, the 7th chapter, yet hard the wise Mahatma is to find, that man who saith, all is Vasudeva. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om,
Good morning, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your couple days of spring that we had. But boy, the flowers sure popped out, didn't they? Suddenly they were there. It was lovely. And now that means they'll just stay with us a lot longer. So this question is pretty much answered right from the beginning. And the Gita reading here today that we had, it just simply said that, well, all is Vasudeva, all is God. I mean, that is how high we should aspire. That's pretty high. You really can't get much higher than that. So what is this God that we're aspiring to? Well, the definition Satchitananda it just describes God as ever conscious, ever existing, ever new bliss. Now that is something to aspire to, isn't it? You know, it is what we are seeking in our lives. And, you know, it's interesting. It's kind of a juxtaposition that I'm doing this talk, particularly this morning, because I had just gotten back from a little more than a week in Phoenix, Arizona, because my niece was getting married, and I went to her wedding. And she's, a lot younger than me. She's in her mid to late 30s. But anyway, all of her friends came from all over, and just that age group was there, except some of us older people, moms and dads and various friends like that. But mainly it was the young people there. Anyway, it was a wedding that was just really very blissful and nice for the kids. I call them the kids. Anyway, and I was just kind of taken by the fact that, this is kind of the way life is for most people. they've kind of have their life, and they got married, and all the joy of bliss of the wedding, and all the trappings and the music, and loud music and things like that happen. And then, of course, the drinks, it was just part of the way probably most people celebrate. And, I know it's very joyous for them, but, it's a way station on our way to God, because that's what life is. It's a progression. And, we're here to have, yes, to enjoy and be a part of what's going on. But, there is a goal for us. And that goal is Satchitananda. That goal is all is Vasudeva. That goal is, to find that oneness with God. I mean, you don't have any choice. I became very aware of this. It's like, you might think you do. We're free in America. We got all this choice, but we don't really have any choice. We're wired to go home to God. I mean, that's all there is. And God always planted within us is that yearning for something that, until we find it, it's always there, isn't it? I know it was for me, and it is still. It's just I'm more conscious of what it is that it is, which I wasn't for a long time. And these young people in the wedding, they're happy and blissful, but, they've got life to face. That was just one little way stop for them, and life is there, and it will happen and unfold for them. I know what many of the goals that I had in my younger years were probably typical, graduate from high school, and you want to graduate, and then many of us want to go to college. That was our goal, and then we get our degree, and then we want to, work in our field and have a good, vocation, and I did that, and then you want to live in a place that's enjoyable, where you feel good about where you're living, and I did that, and you want to have a home, that you're comfortable in, and in a place that you like, and I did that, and then you have your family, or your children, if you do or not, and I did that, and but all along the way, there's that little voice inside of us that's longing for something else. It's hard to believe that not everyone does feel it. It's there. There's something more. You do it and everything is, you think it's perfect, but it's not. There's something else, and you try something else. And, everything just seems to not quite work. So you make a change, and then you make another change. And it's just, this is life. And as you get older, you can kind of look back on it. And you can see your children and your grandchildren, and they're all going through that stuff that you're going through. And, there really is something about, as you begin to get older, something called wisdom. And you begin to understand through your own trial and error, what it is that life is calling you to do. We don't really have any choice, We're wired the way to find God. I mean, that is the purpose of being here. And we all do it in our own way, because we're all individuals, and we are given that opportunity to do what it is that, we do. And the idea is to tune in and do your best. And sometimes we make the right choices, and we are going on that journey towards Vasudeva, getting closer to God. And sometimes our choices aren't so good, and we'll get mired down into areas where finally we'll realize that it just doesn't work. And so we'll start to pull ourselves back up again. And so that's the process of life, The upward currents pulling us upward, the downward currents pulling us downward. It's just this balance. And yet, we're here to pull it upward. That's what every lifetime does. It helps us to move closer to our goal. And so as Jesus said, in this case, for most of us here, in particular, because you've chosen to be here, and so you've come a long ways to even walk into this room. For most people, you're not like the Pharisees, as Jesus said, that you don't really have to, self-righteousness is not something you have to overcome. Most of us have other types of issues, because issues such as, I think for many devotees, it's more being self-critical, getting down on yourself. These little issues that really are issues that pull you down. And what we want to do is always do whatever it takes to lift us up. Yogananda said, the time for knowing God has come, and it is now. In the years past, such as when Jesus was there, he talked in parables a lot because the people, most of the people, the masses, were not quite ready to hear what he has to say. But that was many years ago. And with the rising of consciousness, the time has come for knowing God. It is now. And the great masters, the great teachings of all religions give us the tools that we need to do that. And all we have to do is our best to follow those teachings, whatever it is. And the divine is always there to help you. The divine is always there to give us what we need. We just have to be open and receptive to receiving what it is that we are being given. It's not a matter of if, we're going to find to that highest aspiration, God. It's not a matter of if, Sometimes we feel so unworthy, I'm sure, that there's no way. But that's not true. It's not if, it's when. Because the given is you will. You are going to be one with God. That is the destiny of every soul. Because that's God. We all are God. We're being drawn back. So it's when. And that choice is yours. When are you going to find God? Well, I look back on my life and it took many years. I didn't start off like some people at 19, or something. These people. It was a little later for me. I had to go through a lot of success and a lot of failures, a lot of joy and a lot of pain. And, and that's what, we just go, we're on the roller coaster. And so eventually I woke up, and I don't know how else to say it. It's this kind of these aha moments that you get, and hopefully many of you kind of can relate to that, where there's something that happened, and you were just ready to hear what it is that you needed to hear. And I remember just in a workshop that I was in, one of these self-help workshops that I have told before, it just suddenly came to me like, aha, I'm supposed to find God. I'm supposed to pursue this aspect of my life. And, I had gone through most of my life thinking that, just being a good person was good enough. Because I wasn't raised with religion particularly. It was, Christmas and Easter, and that was kind of it. And I remember in college I went to a lot of churches just kind of searching, wondering what this was all about, and didn't find anything particularly that felt right. And so I kind of fell back to this stance of, well, all I need is to be a good person. I can be kind and generous and loving, and that's it. I don't need anything else. That's good enough. And well, it's certainly a step, isn't it? It's better to be a good person than to be a bad person. And that is a step up. And, this life is a series of, hopefully, for you stepping up. But I was done with that definition. That pulling inside was getting so strong. I had to find what it was that I'm here for. And it came. And that was the beginning of finding what it is for me, this being my path. Our spiritual journeys are not all the same. We have different ways of approaching it. But in particular, for Yogananda brought tools and techniques that I found just very appropriate and meaningful. And the first time I meditated, it was before I had these teachings. It was, again, part of my exploration. But I remember just this, I was reading a book on meditation, and I just suddenly decided I needed to do it. It was like, well, go do it. It was like this urging, go do it. Well, I didn't know how to do it because the book doesn't tell you a whole lot. But I remember I just kind of flew up from where I was sitting, and I don't think I consciously did it. Something, I just rose up, and I went into the bedroom, and all I knew was, you sit cross-legged, and you go, Om, like this, cross-legged. And I was sitting against this board on my back, and I didn't know what to do, but I was just sitting there going, okay, and I always remember, it was a half an hour later when I finally got up, and it was like that time was just a minute. It just flew, and I wasn't sleeping. I just remember being so peaceful and calm. That wasn't me, that was God's grace. That was telling me that that was right, and I needed to keep doing that. Those little ahas, just follow them. In your life, they come to each and every one of us. And they're right. And it takes courage, because usually it brings a great deal of change in our life. Not the way it's always been, or the way you thought it was going to be, but it's the right way. And when you're doing what is right, then you get that satisfaction and that feeling in your heart, and you know it's right. And that's where success is. Success is not ego. This is what we're trying to get away from, is the ego. And I lost what I was thinking about. I want to share an allegory, because this is what Swami Kriyananda wrote when he was only 18 years old. And he says this book, and the story in this book, and it's called The Land of Golden Sunshine, tells more about who he is than even his autobiography that he wrote, The New Path. He said this describes what he sees as himself. And it's just simply a story about a young girl. Her name was Lisa. And she was very poor, and she lived in a kind of a mill town, and she sewed buttons onto men's shirts in a factory. So, and a time passed when that's what women did. There were 100 of them in that factory, and they just sewed buttons. And her parents had passed away, so she lived alone in this attic room. And there was just skylight or sunlight that would come down through the one light window she had in the attic ceiling. And this was her life, and she yearned for something more. She knew there had to be something more, but she didn't know what it was. And one day, on Sundays were her day off, otherwise she worked 6 days a week. On Sundays, she would watch the sun when it was shining, as it would come into her attic window, and it would move across the floor. And she said one time, on Sunday, she was doing this, and it felt different. She'd been very much yearning for what it was that she was yearning for. She didn't really know. And suddenly, in more and more parts, coming into the light, just was the form of a man. It like condensed into the form of this man, and it was just brilliant with light. And she called him the Sun Man. And she looked at him, and all she could feel was love and joy, just emanating from this light from within. And she at first wanted that so much, so badly. And yet, as the light grew closer to her, she was afraid. And so she turned away, she shut her eyes. And when she opened her eyes again, it was gone. It was just the sunlight. And so, but she felt such joy and love. And she just held that in her heart for the next week as she was sewing on her buttons, hoping that the Sun Man would come back to her. And so the next Sunday, again, the sun was shining, and she watched again as that light was moving across through her attic. And she said again, the Sun Man came. And again, this time, she looked at him and saw his eyes. And she was feeling again the love. She knew that he was inviting her. He was telling her, communing with her and saying, won't you come with me? I can take you to a land of peace and love and joy and light. And she yearned for that very much. And yet again, suddenly she started to feel unworthy. And she felt like, no, she couldn't leave, because she had all these things she had to do. People depended upon her, sewing those buttons. And so she turned away again, closing her eyes, and she saw the sadness in his eyes as he faded away. And so the whole next week, as she was sewing her buttons again, she began to realize that she really wanted this more than anything. That what was going on there was really not anything like what she had thought. It was not really a place where she could find the love that she needed. And so she just prayed very deeply that the Sun Man would come back to her. And so on the third day, the third Sunday, again, the sun was there, and he manifested again to her. And this time, she was certain that she was going to be able to just be there and be in that love, and she wanted it so badly. And the Sun Man asked her and said, "Will you turn me away like so many others have? Will you turn my love away and not accept me?" And she wanted desperately to say, "No, I want you." And it took a lot of courage in her heart. But she knew it so desperately that she said, "Yes, I want your love. Yes, I want what you have to offer me." And she was willing. She surrendered. She surrendered. And at that time, the Sun Man enveloped her in his light and moved across the attic floor. And then the room was empty, and she was with that light and love. And this is kind of the story of our journey. We go through these stages where, we have a fear of the unknown. We like to do things the way we like to do them. And we have our set ways of doing things. We have our ego, in other words, that's in charge. And yet we yearn for that greater aspect of who we are. And we go through life looking for it. And it comes, and we get little hints of it, and it goes, it comes, it goes. We hang on to our ego self through all of this, wanting it to be our way, but gradually we start to let go of those little pieces of us, that we think are ours, that we think are real, and the fear gives way, and we feel perhaps so unworthy sometimes, and not good enough, and we get critical and judgmental about ourselves and others, and yet as we go through that stage, we still yearn for that wholeness, and it's there. And we gradually, again, the ego gets chipped away, and we begin to more and more feel that we too are love and joy inside. And it's that progression that we're all going through. So I'm hoping that you all will be able to more and more touch into that Sun Man that comes and goes for yourself, and eventually embrace it. I want to give you a couple of suggestions. I know we're all seeking and doing our best. And so just a few suggestions on that is, first of all, just do it. Meditate, just do it. Because this is, I know I've heard people say, well, I just can't do it. And so they do something else. Anyway, I said, well, it's not choice. You really need to get still somehow. So do it. Even if you're not feeling like you're getting anywhere with it. The important thing is that you do it and give it to God. Because that really is what we're trying to do, everything. It's not us, it's not our ego. So just whatever you do it and give it to God. Meditate, serve, your job, your family, cooking, it doesn't matter. As you're doing it, give it to God. Just say, okay, I'm doing my best. I cook a good meal one night, maybe another meal I cook is horrible. But it's just the way it is. But you're doing your best and give it to God. And that's probably one of the most valuable things that we can take with us. It's a way of getting rid of our self-definitions. And another way that I'd like to do it is to come from the highest. We tend to obviously see all the things that we don't want to see and hold back with our fears. But, come from the highest and do some affirmations for where you're headed. And this one I just learned, and I started to do it, and I really enjoy it. It's really kind of fun. Every morning when you brush your teeth and wash your face, whatever, comb your hair in the mirror, look at yourself and say, "Good morning, great soul." And, you can go, "Me, a great soul." But, you don't do that. Just push it aside. Do it with energy. Affirm that you are. And then another way is to simply pranam and go, "Namaste, namaste." Because again, that's another way of honoring the God within you. And you just do those simple little things, but they start to help you come from that higher place. Just insert it into your day, Great soul, oh, great soul, Who's the great? Oh, great souls, It's really a wonderful way. Swami used to do that. Swami Kriyananda used to do that, the founder of Ananda here. And he would do that to especially the people that came to Ananda early on, and he'd walk into a room and say, "Good morning, great souls," and they'd all look around like, "Where's the great soul here?" But after a while, they are great souls. Those people that have been with us for 40 years and so, they are great souls. They have taken on the work that Master has given us to do, and look how it's transformed. So, you just keep doing it, and it does work. It transforms. And practicing non-attachment, and that's part of what we're talking about here, is just do everything for God. If we take it in ourselves, it's ego, And, I remember when, again, I think I've said this, but when the bookstore was happening many years ago, East West Bookshop, I'll always remember the sense that, who am I to do my little part that I was doing? I didn't know anything about bookstores. I'd been a teacher and, of elementary kids, 5th, 6th graders. What did I know? And people say, "Oh, you know all about books." I said, "Well, yeah, I know a little bit about children's books, but that's not anything about business and starting a store and all that stuff." But all I remember is, and I felt such joy when I got to this point. I just said, "Okay, God," I said, "I can't do this." I knew I couldn't do it. I said, "So you have to do it." And just the idea of God's flowing through you. I just said, "You have to do it." And I said, "If I succeed, I don't get any ego credit here. And if I fail, I don't have to feel badly because you did it and that was your will." So isn't it a nice way to face life that way? I just have found it to be so helpful. You just do your best and give it to God. And so leaving that little advice with you, let's meditate on it.